enables you to answer questions. Because I know a lot of people will have questions in regards to the royal family. Will have a lot of questions in regard to some elements of history and how the progressions of certain races have taken place on this planet. In this discussion, we will provide the means in which you can make the connection and answer those questions. So listen carefully and take good notes. Stewart, now, the book, Blue Blood, True Blood, Conflict and Creation. Get us started on that subject.
Well, after all my years of experience and research and being out there in the world, it became quite apparent that most of history and pretty much a lot of science and medical information is all incorrect. Mm-hmm. Basically, purposely falsified for public consumption so that certain imposition of laws and economies and politics can be imposed based on that false history and false science. And I thought, well, somebody needs to put as much as they can together in one place so you can look and get the general history of the planet the way it supposed to be told. And Blue Blood, True Blood was a result of many years of research and travel to many, many different locations, continents, to get the true and accurate information, as well as you mentioned earlier, when I was in those 13 years of Montauk and subsequent times working in government agencies, mm-hmm. I learned a lot about what's really going on out there that they never tell the public, and which, if anyone did tell the public, of course, they'd be ridiculed as a fool or a conspiracy theorist or what have you. Mm-hmm. And so that's what Blue Blood was about, to give a true semblance of history. Now, of course, it can't have every single thing in there because it would be thousands of pages long and it would be impossible to go through. So I tried to condense it to as readable and as understandable as possible for people to get the true information about why they are the way they are now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, when we speak of blue bloods, and I think it's quite ironic when we speak of blue bloods in the general sense or in the general terms that we've known it over the years in this country, we speak of blue bloods being referred to as royalty, when in reality, blue bloods, amphibians have blue blood. What is the connection between the two?
Well, the term really refers to the type of blood of a particular genetics. Those who have reptilian genetics or reptilian-like genetics have a much higher copper content in their blood. And so when copper oxidizes, it turns a bluish-green color. And that is why they were called blue bloods in the past, because that is how their blood oxidized. And they kept that term because it distinguished them from the so-called masses of humanity, whom they considered to be more animalistic. Mm-hmm. From a reptilian mindset or perspective, mammals or mammalian life forms are inferior because they always have to adapt to environment and because they must always differentiate sexually, whereas most reptilian species in the universe are androgynous and very rarely evolve. They pretty much stay the same eternally.
Folks, you're listening to the Investigators Report. I'm Gary Purifoy with my very, very special guest, Mr. Stewart Swerdlow. We're discussing the history of the blue blood and the blue blood line. Now, we went into detail in our first conversation with you, Stewart, when we talked about the history of our galaxy, the involvement of various extraterrestrial races in connection to what happened here on Earth from creation on. Since we've covered that, well, what we'd like to do is to go from the early stages of the aliens themselves and how the infusion of those races played a part in developing, again, like I said, the royal family, and then what we know today to be the Illuminati.
Right. Do you want me to go back to the time of Lemuria or bring it forward more towards modern history?
More towards modern history.
All right. Well, the blue bloods today, or the Illuminati, illuminati families can trace their ancestors back to the Sumerians. In that area of the world where we're now having the problem with Iraq and Iran in that area there. And they basically were not only the Sumerians, they transformed into the Mesopotamians, Babylonians, the Khazars, spread into Europe and broke into these 13 illuminati families who blended with the remnants of the Atlantean refugees who were there from the time of the destruction of Atlantis, and who also had mixed with the descendants of the Magdalene lineage, which came from ancient Israel or Palestine during the time of Christ. And the people need to remember that the south of France is or was a very large ancient Hebrew kingdom, which was the descendants of Mary Magdalene and her children, who were the children of Christ or Emmanuel, and they became the Merovingians and blended with the Khazars who came into Europe from the east, from the Caucasus Mountains, and blended. Now the Khazars used the symbol of the dragon, and the Merovingians or Magdalenian used the symbol of the pure lion. And when they merged, they created the new symbol, which we see now all throughout Europe, which is that reptilianized lion. It looks like a lion with dragon claws and a very vicious dragon-like face, yet it's a lion-like body. That's where that symbol developed. And we're seeing then, from that point, the breakup of this group into 13 families who controlled various sections of Europe, and then the rest of the world, and still do to this very day. Now, these 13 families have a leader, which they call the Pindar, which translates, means the penis of the dragon. There's a heavy phallic worship in reptilian religion.
Correct.
And the Pindar, for the last almost 800 years now, has been the Rothschild family, or the head of the Rothschilds. But even amongst the Illuminati, they get tired of each other. They do fight amongst each other, even though they have a common goal, which is the domination of Earth. And so we find that the Windsor family has, in the last decade or so, tried to break away from this Illuminati group and become the Pindar themselves. And that's when the EU started to form and break away from the rest of what's going on in the world, and now we're having the formation of North American Union. It's like each one of them who wants to be the Pindar is creating their own empire within the context of a New World Order. And then, to make things more complicated, we're seeing now the Romanov family, who up until the last decade had been quite quiet about their involvement with anything. Now they're trying to create their own version and become the Pindar, which is why we now see Russia acting so brazenly and independent again, and basically reconstituting the Soviet Union as it was before, only without communism, but more like a dictatorship of a socialistic kind.
Right. Now, just to kind of take you a little bit back, because you mentioned Mary Magdalene and you mentioned Christ Emmanuel, which brings us into Da Vinci Code territory.
Right.
So let's kind of focus in on that for clarification, because I know you and I had discussed in brief, or at least it came up in our last conversation, in terms of Christ, who he really was, what he really was, Christianity, and then this formulation of this so-called quote-unquote Christian nation. What happened, now being the fact that the Merovingians and the Magdalenians are descendants of the union between Mary Magdalene and Jesus, what really happened at the cross, Stewart? What really took place there?
Well, I need to go back even a little bit before that.
Okay.
And I want to interject here while we're on the topic that next month we are going on a Magdalene tour in France and Spain, which is going to touch on this very subject, and I'm going to show people live and in person at the various locations exactly what happened in the south of France, especially on the chateau, and all the history is going to come together, and I'm going to